In this video, I'm going to show you the most common school attendance officer interview questions and help you plan strong answers to these that will help you get the job. So let's look at one of the most important and the really fundamental question that they're going to ask, and that is, how would you improve attendance? And remember, your job is basically to be the person that's responsible for attendance, and you're going to be charged with helping improve it. So they're likely to ask about it. So let's look at the key things that you need to get into your answer. So the first thing to think about is the systems, then talk about the causes, and then talk about your actions. So before you start saying, I'm going to do this, think about all the things that have to come before you're able to take any action. So the first thing about systems is you say the first thing that has to happen is there has to be robust, accurate, and effective attendance tracking. So you need to know exactly who is in the building at any time, and you know exactly who is absent. So you need to have that data before you can do anything. The next thing is there needs to be attendance triggers. So you need to have systems where if attendance falls to this level and then this level and then this level, 90%, 80%, 70%, that there is specific detailed actions in a policy that could be triggered. And that there's also got to be some data analysis. So once you've got that good attendance data, which should be in place, you need to analyze it. You need to start spotting patterns. You need to be understanding what that data is telling you. For example, you might look at a particular pupil who has very good attendance 4 days of the week, but tends to be absent on a Monday. And that could be a pattern that could have some information in it that you could use to address that attendance issue. The next thing you want to say is that there needs to be a culture of high attendance, that the school needs to clearly communicate with parents and pupils that good attendance is the expectation, and that there is also vigilance, that things are not missed, that where a student is absent, every time action is taken, and that it's not a case of attendance just gets worse and worse and worse and then something is done, that there is a vigilance there. Then you want to talk about early intervention. So you don't allow patterns of poor attendance to get worse. You don't allow attendance to drop. That where a student's attendance begins to drop, you're starting to put in early intervention to prevent that. Then you can talk about the causes. So you're going to build relationships with the family and community so that you can help to understand the causes of the attendance issues. You want to find out the reasons for the absences. So where a student is absent, you want to know why. If it's a dentist appointment and they're missing the end of the day once, that is one issue, whereas some attendance issues may be more serious and may need further action. And you need to know what the reason is for the attendance before you can do anything about it. The next thing is you're going to just mention that you want to engage with attendance research, that you read about attendance, and you look at best practice. It's just a good thing to mention. You also want to talk about collaboration with outside agencies. So people from outside agencies that work with that individual that will have a good understanding of their attendance issues, and their teachers or their form tutor who knows more about the student than perhaps you do. You can go to them and you can get some insights into the causes of their attendance issues that you can use to help formulate a plan to improve it. And now you've talked about that, you're ready to talk about the actions. So the first action you're going to say is you're going to support families to address attendance issues. That's a fundamental thing. You can then say that where attendance is poor and it hits a certain trigger, that you would work to follow the process of sanctioning that. So that may be fines, which are set out in the law, that where, for example, parents are not sending their children to school and attendance gets very, very poor, and its unauthorized attendance is very high, you can actually issue certain fines, and there's a process for doing that. You're going to say that you're going to use that. That you can also have home visits where you actually go and visit the student's home and meet the parents in person to address the attendance issues. And then you can also talk more broadly about contributing to the whole school policies and the whole school systems, and where you've got rewards for very good attendance, and there is a whole school positive attendance culture. So from this, you should be able to plan a very strong answer. If you were to discuss all of these aspects, you would put together a really great answer. So feel free to screenshot this or take any notes that you want and be ready for this question. The next thing you need to be prepared for is safeguarding questions. They are very likely to ask a question around safeguarding, and it is good to have a general approach. So they might ask about a specific situation. They may say, imagine this happens to a student. How would you deal with it? Imagine a student comes to you and tells you this. What are you going to do? And for all of these questions, there is a core set of things that you need to talk about. So the first thing, whenever you're approached with a safeguarding question, it's a good idea to say, I take my safeguarding responsibilities very seriously, because they are incredibly important. The next thing you'd say is that you need to know the school policy. So schools will have a safeguarding policy, and that is what you need to follow, along with the national and government statutory guidance, and that you need to know what the school will likely term the DSL, the designated safeguarding lead. So you need to know who in the school is the lead for safeguarding that issues should be directed to. That you should also emphasize that safeguarding matters are confidential and shouldn't be discussed outside of work and shouldn't be discussed readily, that these need to be kept very confidential within authorized people. So, for example, the designated safeguarding lead, they will be privy to a lot of safeguarding information, and safeguarding concerns will be shared with them, but they shouldn't be shared widely, and that they are to be treated confidentially. And of course, you don't keep secrets. So if a student or a child discloses something to you, that isn't going to be kept secret. It's got safeguarding implications. That needs to be shared with the appropriate people, but also kept confidential. The next thing you say is that safeguarding is a shared responsibility, that as an attendance officer, safeguarding is part of your job. It is not something that is just passed on to someone else and just completely ignored. You are part of safeguarding. Every single person that goes into a school is part of safeguarding. And so it is a shared responsibility for everyone. It may not be your responsibility likely to investigate or take actions very often, but you need to follow the policies that are set down and have an appreciation that safeguarding is a responsibility of everyone. And then lastly, a good thing to be aware of is, if in doubt, report it. So if you think, is this a safeguarding issue? Is it just a little thing and it's not a big deal? If in doubt, it's always best to report it, because what happens is when lots of reports come in, it builds a picture and it just helps everyone involved in safeguarding that individual to have as much information as possible. So that is how you approach really any safeguarding question. These are the key things that you need to get in. Stop and think before you get a safeguarding question, and definitely do not give the wrong answer. You always want to go back to the safeguarding policy, that you're going to follow the policy, you're going to do what your training tells you to do. You're not going to make up your own systems. Keep saying that you're going to follow the policy, and that's going to help you to be successful in any safeguarding question. The next one is related. So they would say, what would you do if a pupil or parent complained about a member of staff? And what they want you to say is that you're going to do the right thing, that you're going to not mess it up, and that they could trust you with that information, and you're going to deal with it appropriately. So let's look at a good answer that says what they want to hear. So the first thing you say is that complaints should be taken seriously and always listened to. So if someone is making a complaint, you're not going to stop them, interrupt them, talk over them, or redirect them away from making the complaint. You're going to listen to it, and you're going to record it accurately. The next thing you say is complaints must be dealt with in accordance with the school's complaint and safeguarding policies. So you don't need to say, I'm going to do this, because that might not be the right thing. Just say that you're going to follow the school's policies, that they are going to tell you how you deal with this, and that's what you're going to do. So keep it general. Then you say complaints must be treated as highly confidential, that if someone complains about a member of staff, you can't go and just start telling other people in the department about that complaint or just discussing it casually. It needs to be treated with a high amount of confidentiality. The complaint hasn't been proven at this point. It's not been investigated. It needs to be considered objectively and fairly, and it should not be discussed without talking to only people who are authorized and have a need to have that information, which should be specified in the school's complaints policy. In most instances, it would be the school principal who would be the person that would be passed on to. You then say, I would ensure that the complaint is recorded accurately and passed to the appropriate member of staff. The appropriate member of staff is likely to be the principal, unless it's a complaint about the principal. And then you say, after you have passed that on, it's to be dealt with as appropriate, and that will be a decision made by a more senior member of staff. You have done what you should do by passing it to the more senior member of staff and following the complaints policy properly. So the real key to this is that you follow the complaints policy, you don't make up your own thing, and you treat the complaint confidentially, and that is how you're successful. The next one is a very simple one, but it has to get some key ideas in. How would you notify a parent that their child is absent for school? And the first thing you say is that you would verify attendance information. So before you call a parent and say, we don't know where your child is, you want to make sure that they're definitely not in the building, that the attendance information that you have in front of you is accurate. Then what you want to do is you want to be polite and professional. So it's just a good thing to say that I'm always polite and always professional in interactions with parents. Sometimes, particularly in the attendance officer role, parents can be very challenging, and it is a role where you can get a lot of abuse and a lot of pushback, and you need to be someone who is calm and polite and professional and doesn't escalate that. The next thing you ought to say is that you'd make contact in line with the attendance policy. So, the attendance policy will have a procedure that you follow where you are going to notify a parent. Again, a lot of the time you're just saying, I'm going to follow the policies, because schools should have policies that have clear procedures that you are to follow. The next thing you say is that when you're speaking to the parent, you want to find out the reasons and record those reasons, because knowing why students are absent is going to feed into what you're going to do about their absence. And then lastly, you say that during the conversation, you look to reinforce attendance procedures. So if the parent hasn't notified you that their child is absent and they're supposed to tell the school in the morning, they haven't done that, politely reminding them, in future, could you let us know so that we don't need to call you, and that we can get that sorted straight away. And then if a student's attendance is dropping, you want to reiterate attendance expectations and be clear that attendance needs to improve and that students are expected to be in school and it's very important for their education. And that's how you answer this question. And then before we finish, here are some questions that you may want to ask after your interview. So they'll say, do you have any questions for us? And here's some things that you might want to ask. So you could say, can you tell me how attendance fits into your school improvement plan, and how could I contribute to this in my role? And they will tell you what they are looking to improve, where attendance is now, where they want to get it, and how that feeds into their priorities for improving the school. And you can engage in a conversation about how you're actually going to help the leadership that are interviewing you to actually achieve their goals. So it's quite a nice question to ask. You could say, what CPD and development opportunities could be potentially available in this role? You could ask, what originally attracted you to work at this school? And when they tell you the good things about the school and why this is a good place to work, you can share in that enthusiasm. And also, you can be finding out, is this the right place for you as well? You could then say, I'm very interested in this attendance officer position. Could you tell me the next steps and a timeline for feedback? And then lastly, end the interview in a positive, reiterate your interest, make it clear that you're a firm candidate if this is the right job for you, and thank the panel for their time in interviewing you. So I wish you the best of luck in your attendance officer interview. If this was helpful, please like and subscribe below and post in the comments what questions you were asked in your interview. And finally, thank you very much for watching.